Welcome to another episode of Learning Strategies. I said almost learning styles, but that would be wrong. Welcome. Hi, Jane. Good to see you. Um, Kate is somewhere because this is a program in which we discuss all possible learning strategies. And today we're going to discuss the differences between learning strategies and learning styles. Learning styles is often a very popular subject, but finally, we found something that Kate dislikes because I have a theory that I say that NLP trainers have three different modes: listening mode, teaching mode, and battle mode. You almost never find them in listening mode. They find it very hard to listen to others. You often find them in teaching mode, and they also can be in battle mode. But Kate is almost never in battle mode. She tries to avoid battle mode. But maybe today, for learning styles, we get her to see her in action in battle mode. So let's invite her on the stream. Hello, Kate. Are you ready?
Hello, Joost. Yes, I've got my soapbox ready and my muscles are flexed.
Good. Because we finally found something where we can get you agitated on, and that you want to have a soapbox and to tell the world what's wrong with it.
Absolutely, yes. So, yes.
Good.
So we-
And the topic is learning styles. At least we are going to discuss the differences between learning styles and learning strategies, and what is wrong with learning styles and what is good about learning strategies. But can you explain what are learning styles? What do people mean when they talk about learning styles?
Okay, well, yeah, what are learning styles? Learning styles are wrong. So
Yes, they are wrong.
So I'm going to use Yo's terminology here. Learning styles are wrong. No, let's go back a bit. So the idea has become perpetuated through, and I'll tell the story at some point, the history of how pseudoscience becomes accepted reality. And learning styles is one of these things. So some people who know a little bit about NLP decided to create something called learning styles based on a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing.
Right.
So as we know in NLP, if people here joining us today know a little bit about NLP, they will know that thinking is made up of a number of processes. In order to think, we do thinking by making pictures, by talking to ourselves, to remembering images, pictures, and imagining pictures.
Right.
Remembering and hearing things and imagining hearing things, and feelings.
Right.
We call them kinesthetics, which can be touch sense feelings and also emotional feelings, kinesthetics, and through sense of smell and taste in the same way. Right. We can remember things we've tasted and smelled, and we can imagine things we've tasted and smelled. So if I
can I enter some beautiful jargon that I found at my philosophy studies?
Oh no, we don't do jargon. You know, I don't do jargon.
I know, but this is beautiful jargon.
All right,
and I did not think of it myself, but the professor who taught it me, she also forgot the originator. So it is not. We don't know who came up with the idea. I have not found it, but there. So if you want to do it scientific, you say we have memories. Because memories are obvious, and they all the other what you call imagining or there's a beautiful term for it. There are memory-like fantasies.
Okay, yeah, that's right. Because you know, technically, the place for memory and the place for fantasy or imagining is very, very, very close on the cortex, on the neurological cortex.
Right.
And so, if we remember something. If we imagine something and then we remember imagining it, it's like a memory.
Right.
So they're very similar. Anyway, that is not very relevant. It's not that relevant to learning styles, but it's a nice point. Thank you.
It is relevant to me. Okay. I think there's no difference between memories and fantasy-like memories. Memory-like fantasies. because for the brain there is no difference. The only difference is that somewhere else in the brain we make a distinction between this has happened, this is real, and this has not happened yet.
Okay.
This is not
The
real.
only thing that counts in this point is that we make pictures. Right. That's all. For the sake of learning styles, all we need to know is that we make, in order to think, we make pictures. So we make visual images. We hear things, which we call auditory input or auditory output, and we feel things.
It even reached football. Because our team manager of the Dutch national team, I don't even know whether it's in English, but he came up with this term. He said, "Yeah, I make players better because I teach them something called imagineering."
Right, imagineering. Well, imagineering's been around for quite a long time, especially in sports coaching. So exactly. That's very much based on the good science that they did with baseball players. They're not basketball players many years ago. Right. So it's imagineering is well established as a technique for getting better at stuff. So all we need to know at the moment is we do pictures, we do hearing, and we do feelings, and we call these visuals, auditory, and kinesthetics. And right. That is what makes up thinking. And
for someone who doesn't do jargon, I think kinesthetic sounds a lot like jargon.
It is jargon, it's feelings, but I'm using these three terms very specifically. I've already said thinking is made up of making pictures, hearing things, and feeling things, which are also called in NLP visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. It's an important piece of jargon because somebody came along and liked the jargon, who happened to be a teacher, and they went, "Oh, well, then what we're looking for is a way of understanding how people learn." So this visual, auditory, and kinesthetic thinking, people must learn in that way. So right. There are visual learners, auditory learners, and kinesthetic learners. They propose this as, this was a proposal that maybe this is how people think. So they sent out questionnaires to find out if people who were the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic thinkers.
Right.
And this
was this before? Because in Dutch we have in the Netherlands we have the Montessori.
Oh no, Montessori is different. Now that's grounded on reasonably well-founded principles that young children, in particular, in fact, learn by doing things.
Right.
And so Montessori is a learning by doing. It's an absorption methodology. It's about creativity and getting involved. And actually, children under the age of 7 don't really want to do it any other way. Richard has always said, the trouble with Montessori is it condemns people to kinesthetic learning, because if you carry that on forever, there right. are learners and this who do have a preference. There are preferences, but they're not about what we're talking about learning styles here, who might prefer, for example, in some instances, to watch somebody doing something first before they have a go. So if they're always told that they have to have a go first, then that's very difficult for those people.
Right.
But when we get back to this visual, auditory, kinesthetic thing, so somebody decided, and I even know who this is, and I can't even say who it is because I'd probably be done for insulting them or something. But this was sent out. People at the time, this was in the late 80s, were desperate for something that differentiated learners. Because the big drive in education at the time was for what they called differentiation. So in a classroom, a teacher was being asked, how do you differentiate the needs of your students? So, that's about some people learn a bit more slowly, some people learn a bit more quickly, some people need more stretch and challenge, and all the different variety, because a class of 30 isn't a cohesive unit. It's made up of 30 individuals. And so education was keen to be able to do this. Now,
they should just have used brain types.
Well, they could have used quite a number of different things. And so what happened was this mad scramble to find an easy to use tool that would differentiate so that the teacher could say, I've done my differentiation. And so these learners get this and these get this and get this. Now, they tried a number of things. They used Myers-Briggs. They tried to use Myers-Briggs. They tried, what's the other one called? The other business one, Myers-Briggs and Oh, I can't.
Spirodynamics, DISC.
I don't remember. Anyway, you know those business models that they
Yes.
came up with for different management styles? They tried to use those as well.
Management drives.
They were desperately trying to find a tool so that, and it was basically so the teacher could give some children a questionnaire or give young people a questionnaire or learners a questionnaire and determine what type of learner they were and then make some adjustment for it. And because there wasn't anything, one particular sector launched onto this VAK learning styles questionnaire. That's why I was using those terms, because that's what it became known as, the VAK style questionnaire.
Right.
And they latched onto it. And it was one of those, it was a meme, basically. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
Because there wasn't anything out there, people grabbed it and used it so they could say when the inspectors came in, oh, yes, I've differentiated my classroom with this questionnaire. Look, I've got a list of the results of those people. And it got to the point where children were sitting in schools with a label in front of them that said visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. And so the visual learners got that.
But they did not tattoo it on their head?
Yeah, they were tattooing it on their foreheads, yes.
Exactly.
And the auditory ones got auditory, and then the kinesthetic. And it was a complete nonsense. But it perpetuated all through the 90s and well into the noughties. And it's only really in the last 10 years that people have started to actually accept what I've been beating on about for the past 20 years, that it isn't about style, it's about strategy.
Right.
And that anybody, well, sometimes people will have a preference under certain circumstances for making pictures more than generating kinesthetics. But it's always a sequence. So the difference between learning styles and strategies is to do with sequence.
But I also think that in strategies you use all of the senses.
Yes, absolutely. In sequence.
Right.
In a particular way. So that's how this dreadful thing called learning styles came about. I still find it, I still find my steam coming out of my ears when I read stuff that somebody is referring back to some research done 20 years ago, because now it's become in the annals of history. We now, we have people referring to this as if it's genuine research, and it was never genuine research.
Well,
and there was a very good document.
Not researched.
If anybody wants to read more about this, that one of the best assessments of learning styles was done by a guy called Frank Coffield, Coffield, from Northumberland University. He's a lovely bloke, and he wrote a really good paper on this. And he concluded, which is why people who do teaching excellence are exposed to one model. He concluded out of all the different ways of assessing styles and preferences in learning, the only one that really had any credibility was Gardner's learning styles.
Right.
Which is why I introduced that on teaching excellence, because it actually has some validity, because it talks about intelligences. It talks about the way people are intelligent rather than having a style or a preference.
And what are all these intelligences?
The intelligences are, and Gardner's learning styles are, I've got to remember them now, kinesthetic, so musical, interpersonal, intrapersonal, naturalist, that's not naturist, that's liking learning in nature. Did I say kinesthetic?
Mini bells.
Mini bells. Musical, interpersonal, natural, body smart, that's to do with movement and moving around to learn. Emotional, not emotional, what's the other one? Yes, emotional, linguistic, and logical.
Right.
Now, emotional is an added one because Gardner didn't originally put emotional in. That's been added. So the others, the linguistic, logical, naturalist, body smart, kinesthetic, spatial.
Well, based on your work with Gardners and also the feedback I got from my students, I now have I make many podcasts or hypnotic meditations on my podcast. and there's always some nice techno music, also very slow, of course, playing under it. And then people complained that there was no nature in it. So now I also have waves and birds and trees waving in the wind. Yes,
Good. That's good, and that's it. And it's quite easy using Gardner. The problem with differentiation in the classroom, where we say, "Oh, okay, what are all these different styles?" The problem with differentiation is that we cannot expect a teacher to teach 30 different lessons.
right.
We have to be able to incorporate people's preferences, styles, strategies and intelligences into one lesson. So that's why, this whole multi-layer approach with Gardner's works really easily, because as you say, you have a bit of music playing in the background, you use a metaphor from nature, you have some group activity, you have a bit of self-reflection, you have something that's a bit logical in there, a bit mathematical. And then everybody gets a little bit of something that they like, and that encourages them and motivates them. So it makes differentiation very easy using Gardner. But if we then come on to the difference between a style or a preference or an intelligence and a strategy, the strategy is the process by which we learn something. So, and as you said, we use all of the senses and all of the representation systems to have a good strategy. Strategies need to be short, but not too short. They must have, they have to.
I had one student who, when we do spinning feelings technique, he said, "Wow, that is just taking way too long. If I want to feel good, I just do ha!" And then he felt good. He had a type 8 brain. He's very, very fast. I think if it works for him, it's a perfect strategy. It's very, very short.
That's right. Yeah.
Feel good. 3 steps.
But actually, you've still got the 3 steps in there. You've still got that saying something, some sound involved in that, a decision to feel good, some sound. I don't know what the visual is in there. Probably there's something in there. Maybe it's just an image of himself feeling good, and then the move into kinesthetic.
I don't think there were images. He has a different story about if he used to. He also had a whole story about visual imagery. He said, "Yeah, the other way I use it is I imagine a circus tent." And with all lined up with mirrors, and then I see an angry dog walking into this tent, and he is seeing all the other angry dogs, and he gets very scared. And then I see a happy dog going in and seeing all the other happy dogs around him, and he becomes very happy. And he says, "Then I'm also being happy." That's all more of an elaborate.
That's very complicated, isn't it?
Yeah,
is that the same person who did the
same person? Yes, that's the same one that's going like this.
Oh well. Maybe he could combine the two. I don't know. Why did he need the angry dogs first? I don't understand. Why he just go straight for the happy dogs? I mean, happy dogs, that'd make me happy. A whole set of mirrors around me with my dog Teddy laughing at me and with his tongue hanging out. That would do it for me.
I always have weird students. It's like I don't want normal students.
No, I know you don't.
But I don't always understand them.
That's all right.
I don't want to understand them.
So if we think about how we learn something, when we start thinking about a strategy, people will do one of those things first. They will make a picture, or they will say something to themselves, or they will have a feeling. That's almost inevitable. They're going to start with one of those, but it doesn't stop with one of those. That's the difference. They don't do the whole thing visually, or the whole thing auditorily, or the whole thing kinesthetically. Right. They do it with a sequence, but it's where they start. And so what's happened is that where people generally start has become identified as their learning style.
Okay, that is new for me. I learned something today. Yes.
Oh. Oh well, you must have been asleep through teaching excellence when I was teaching this bit. Then you must go, "Oh, I know that bit."
No. You never said that. I have done 10 teaching excellences by now, and you never said this.
Oh, I have.
No, you haven't.
Okay, I've never said it just like that.
in the Netherlands, we have this term. I don't think they call. Yeah, they're also called learning styles nowadays. But they used to say that they just took one. They said, "I'm an image thinker." I don't. Is that something in the
Yeah,
UK?
that's the same as saying I'm a visual thinker.
Or a visual thinker,
Same
yeah.
thing, visual thinker.
And then people would ask me, Joost, can I participate in your course because I'm a visual thinker, and do you actually take that into account? I said, "Well, yes, of course. I'll make sure you can see me."
Exactly. Quite. But we actually, what also happens when you get people who sort of kick back on this. So I've had people quite assertively saying to me, "You can't teach me like that because I'm a visual learner." Okay. Or, what adjustment are you making to me because I'm an auditory learner? And I go, well, I'm talking to you. But you can. But the other thing is you don't need the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic triggers always. Because if I ask somebody to make a picture, then I'm just shifting them into their visual thinking process.
Right.
So if I say, picture this, then that's an instruction to make a picture. You don't have to go, here's the picture. You might want to, because you might want to have that image in front of you, but it's not essential. You can lead somebody through visuals into an auditory step, or through auditory into a visual step or a kinesthetic step. We do that all the time. It's called communication. It's called talking.
Right.
So
because I always have the idea that if you would apply learning styles or the visual thinker thing, is that then you would teach people in a way that they're already good at. So the visual thinker is good at imagination, but might not be so good at feeling or in thinking or in inner self-talk. And my idea would be, okay, you're good at visualizing stuff. Great. Let's see if we can improve the way you handle your feelings and your own inner self-talk.
Absolutely. And that's absolutely right. Because actually, it's a silly proposal, really. But if we only taught people according to their so-called style or preference, then they would never get any better at learning, because they would learn more things, but they would learn more things in exactly the same way. And the purpose of a teacher isn't necessarily to teach stuff; it's to teach learning.
Right.
So it's the number of different ways you can learn and how you can go about learning. And I just want to illustrate this so people can try this for themselves. If you think that, going back to this whole thing about sequencing, so if you think about the way you start to do something, that's usually your first preference, if you like. Now, it'll be different according to what you're doing. But let's say it's, so the one I often use for people is when they decide to use a new program on their computer, because most people do that now. So what I will ask people is, what do you do first? There you have, you've got a new program, you need to learn how to do it. What do you do first? Do you read the manual or read the instructions on the screen? Do you fiddle around for a bit to see whether or not you can work out what you do? Do you ask somebody to tell you how to do it, so they sit next to you and you do this? Or do you ask somebody to show you how to do it? So those are all different ways into learning something new.
Right. But sounds to me like, because these are pretty much the questions I asked for discovering brain types, it just sounds to me that you're sorting for brain types.
Well, maybe, but it's not a model I use as fluently as you do. So then I would say, okay, so what is the first thing you would do? So what would you do, Joost, first?
When I start a new program?
Yeah, you're starting to learn to use a new program.
Yes, it's a difficult question, because somehow it used to be that in the 80s that we were just swapping these small disks to make sure that you got new programs. But nowadays I hardly ever start a new program.
Well, think of something else.
Just because I'm not very fast in answering doesn't mean I found.
No, I know that. No, I was just giving you a clue.
Right. So, but now, yeah, I know. But I'm just thinking about what I recently. For instance, there are different phases. So often I am installing lots of different programs because I need, for instance, video editing software, and I want to have so ease of use and that it doesn't cost me a lot of time. So I try out lots of programs, and I know what I start with. Nowadays I always enter into Google top 10 best video editing software programs 2022. So I get a list of the ones, and I just start at the first one, and download it, try it out, and as soon
Okay,
as I
so
don't,
just stop there.
oh,
Because the first thing was because the thing is we think really quickly. So one of the things to understand how somebody's strategy is to slow it down a little bit. So somebody who doesn't think as quickly like me can work it out. So you've got your list, which is a sorting process, really. So you've asked Google a question. Google's told you the answer. Here's the 10, and you go for the top one and you download it. Okay, so the very first thing you do is you download it because you know how to download it. So that's not a learning process, is it? You know how to download it. So you downloaded it, and then you said you try it out.
yes.
So what do you do? How do you try
most
it out?
recently, I wanted to make small movies for TikTok. I wanted to see an easy process. So I have all my old videos, lots of video material, but then reshape it to the format of TikTok. So now we have a broad screen, but for TikTok you need to have like it's on a phone. And I basically I say open the software package, then I open the video file that I want to change, and I basically see how easy it is for me to change the format and look like. And the moment I get frustrated or don't know or should read something, I immediately stop and go to the number 2.
Okay. So you have it's quite interesting what you've said there, because it's like, I mean, this is why learning strategies are so fascinating. So you have to separate what you already know from learning something new. So you're going through a process of which most of it you know. Right. So you know how to download it, you know how to open it, you know how to upload your video or put your video into it, and then you see how easy it is to do. So all of that is testing a process out. But it's quite interesting. So I still don't think we've got to a learning bit yet, because it's all of that is familiar to you. But what is quite interesting is the language that you used is already hinting to me what your sequence might be. Because you said, the first thing you said, I've written it down, I have to put my glasses on. You want to see how easy the process is. And then you said, and you want to be able to reshape it. So already you used 2 words, one which is indicating like you like to look at how this does. You're in a visual mode, if you like. Your first step is visual. And then the next one is to somehow reshape it, which is a very kinesthetic type process, type word. So you're already
in this case, it is really about the visual shape. So I'm not sure whether.
Yeah, okay. Well, so you're already hinting at to me a little bit about the way you might do it, and that's in the same way as when you're looking at brain types. You're listening to the actual answer, but you're also listening for the process that the person is going through to
Definitely. But you're not saying that because I said I want to see whether I can get what I want out of it, that means that I'm doing a visual process, right?
No. I'm saying you're hinting at this point. All I'm saying is that's interesting. Yoelster's used those 2 words in a sequence. So I will then be listening to see whether or not that repeats.
Right, because I think it's very much a kinesthetic process in the sense that I try to achieve it, and I'm constantly checking with my feelings whether I'm achieving it. And if the feeling of frustration builds up too strongly, that indicates that I should move on to the next candidate.
And that may be, well, and you could very simply, it's probably more complicated that, but for the sake of illustration, you could say that, you type something in Google, that's a kinesthetic process, external kinesthetic. You look at the list, right. That's a visual. So we go K external, V visual, and then you download it. That's another K. presumably when you're listening to the video, there's some auditory input in terms of whether it's working or not.
I'm not sure. There might actually,
Well, maybe not. I mean, it doesn't, and then you check with your feelings, and that's your quit point.
Right.
It's like, is this working? Does it feel nice? It doesn't. No, move on. So you've got a very short little loop strategy to move on to, and then you're on to the next one. So you've done your your tote, you test, operate,
definitely.
test, exit that one, next one, test, operate, test, exit next one. So you're running the sequence through. And what I would do,
I don't think these are exits. I think these are feedback loops doing the operation again.
Well, yeah, but I mean, exit to the next one, to the number 2, number 3, number 2. You out of this one into the next one, out of this one into the next one. So yes, loop round, next one, loop round, next one, loop round, next one. So in a way, already there's a little bit of a sequence that we can elicit a little bit of a sequence there.
Definitely, yes.
We would still not say that's absolutely it. But we would then continue the conversation to maybe look at something else in a different way. But people will do things in a different sequence depending on what they're doing. So, for example, if and of course, the strategy works not just for learning, but for lots of other things. So if I'm buying something, I will have a strategy that goes through those representation systems in a similar way to if I'm learning something. So, for example, when I'm buying a car, most of it for me is about, the majority of it is around the kinesthetics. I want to sit in the seat and see how it feels. I want to feel what the engine feels like. I want to feel what the gearbox feels. If somebody says to me, isn't that a lovely color? It's not even on my list.
Right.
If somebody says, what color would you like? I'd have to really stop.
Purely auditory. I buy them purely auditory.
So you buy them purely auditorily, based on what they sound like, what the engine sounds like?
What the stereo in this car sounds like. I'm not kidding.
No, I believe you. I absolutely believe you. You see, I wouldn't even think to turn the stereo on. I wouldn't put the stereo on probably for about 3 weeks.
I spent an additional €1,000 just to get my Pioneer DJ capable woofer system built into the car, so that I now have a perfect dance club driving around.
You remind me about, I bet when I was teaching teenagers, they used to, when they got their first car, they would spend like £500 on this beat up old banger of a car, and they would have this huge sound system built into the back of it, and they would lift the hatchback and be blasting out across the car park of the college, so the sound system would be worth a couple of £1,000, and the car was a few hundred.
Yes. So the car salesperson, when he was explaining to me how the sound system would go, he said, "Well, we moved the subwoofer in the back." I said, "Oh well, I'm now 50. Yeah? I can't have these big boxes." He says, "No. There's a special compartment for it. We don't see everything." But I feared that they were going to do the same.
Huge round thing on the back of the. I love that. That's brilliant. Now it's about this big. It does the same thing. But you see, that's interesting. So, but you see, unless we have these conversations, this is why people are so endlessly fascinating. Because I'm sitting there going, really? Auditory? That's important to you when you buy a car? And I'm, and you're going, really? You care about what the seat's like? So we. And of course, salespeople are taught these things. You go in and they say, just look at how beautiful the lines are and the color. And I'm going like, what? I mean, why do you care about that?
Right.
So actually learning about how, listening and learning about people's steps. And of course, going back to the other point that we were making, is it's really important to find ways that you can exercise those thinking muscles in a different way. So, if people tend always to do things very visually, and they if you like, they're
one moment, I have to check on my cats. You can entertain our viewers.
Oh, it's quite interesting because my dog. Well, that's very strange because my dog has just let himself in the room, and I'm trying to carry on whilst Teddy is looking at me.
But I have to check whether the one is escaping or not.
Come on, then you carry on. I'll carry on talking.
Oh,
Oh, that's the wrong way around. Oh, hello, everybody. It's just me and you now. That's it. So what I was saying is that we need to exercise those muscles when we're learning new things, so that we can start to learn in different ways. And so people don't get condemned to only being able to learn in one way or another, because it limits people's ability to learn new stuff. And I really, there's an illustration in my book which I think shows this really well, which was a little boy who couldn't do, was told, non-verbal reasoning. Non-verbal reasoning are those puzzles where you get 3 or 4 shapes on a page, and you have, and looking at them from different angles, and you have to decide which ones are the same shape and which ones are not the same shape. And what this little boy was doing, why I need to find out why he couldn't do it, and why he couldn't do it was that he didn't have enough imagination to make the shape 3-dimensional and then compare it with the others. So we had to deconstruct the process using visual, auditory, and kinesthetic steps so that he could learn to sequence the process for non-verbal reasoning. And the first thing I did was I got him to draw music, because he said he didn't have a lot of imagination. So we played music, and we used Vivaldi's 4 Seasons, as it happens, because we could tell the story about how it was through the seasons, and we could listen to winter and spring and summer and autumn. And then he would draw a picture of what the music, what it looked like. But of course he had to also engage his feelings about how it made him feel in order to draw. So we're using an auditory, visual, and kinesthetic process to exercise that imagination muscle. So that's why we can bring in all these different steps and sequences, so that people can expand the richness of their internal world, which is what good teaching is about. It's about making the brain richer in its capacity. Are your cats all right?
Yes.
I have to now get up now and let my dog out of the room, who's standing at the door, and if I don't, he'll bark.
So well, now I'm in the entertainment program while we wait for Kate to return. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We're more than happy to answer.
Oh yes, some questions would be good. People usually have lots of questions about, how do I learn this, and how do I do that, and what do I do about this? But not today.
But not today, no.
Well, maybe they'll. So when we look at, a lot of people will talk about, in terms of learning strategies, the way we often introduce learning strategies to people, or the way they come about it first, is with the spelling, what they call the NLP spelling strategy.
Right.
Which is, Richard made really famous. But actually it's important, not just because it is a good illustration of a great strategy, because it's short, it doesn't involve any excess loops, it's as short as it can be without
Often I see it represented in all kinds of books, and I think they're wrong. Because they say, okay, you have to start with a good feeling, but I think that is basically screwing up the spelling strategy. And so the basic NLP spelling strategy is basically visualizing words rather than doing an auditory inside your head. But of course, that is not a very fast way to spell. So fast spellers actually just write and have a kinesthetic going on. And if the kinesthetic gives them a bad feeling, they know they have made a mistake, a typo. And then they go over and look, okay, but what did I do wrong?
No, I don't agree with you. I don't agree with that. I agree in part with what you're saying. I agree in part. I think that starting with the good feeling, the reason we teach that isn't for somebody who can, this is for when you're installing a strategy. And actually it works for every strategy. There is no point in starting to install a strategy without a good feeling associated with it. So the reason that the first step is find a good feeling is to make sure that the sequence that's going to follow has good kinesthetics associated with it, so people will want to repeat it. That's the reason for doing it.
But that still doesn't work. That's how the brain works. But the brain works the other way around. that if you have a strategy that actually gets you what you want, for instance, a good score on your spelling test, then you get a good feeling
Well,
because you
that may be
reward
the case, but a lot of times when we're putting when we're putting strategies in place, it's often it depends. It's a good question, Jos, because it actually there are two different types. There are two different probably more, but at least two different times when we want to install a strategy. The first is when somebody doesn't have the strategy at all. So that would be in the case of spelling when we're teaching little children to spell.
Right.
Now, you know, what we will always say is if we go in and scare them and then we teach them to spell it and then they feel good because they're doing it, it's not as good a strategy as making it fun in the first place.
Right.
So I go in with my magic wand and my sit for a spell and all, you know, Auntie Kate being silly. And then we whack the strategy in and then we all feel marvelous and fantastic, especially when we do it backwards as well. Right. So that's about when you're teaching somebody right from scratch. Now, the other type of strategy we might install is more likely to be in an older person, either a teenager or an adult, where they have learned a really poor strategy. Because the difference between a good speller and a poor speller isn't that one's brighter and one's cleverer than the other. It's that they haven't got the right strategy.
Right.
And they haven't been taught the right strategy. And usually what happens is if you say to somebody who has a poor spelling strategy, just the instruction, can you spell? They immediately go into a whole load of bad feelings. They look down, they go like that, the shoulders come round, they feel slightly sick and they go, no. So the first thing you have to counter before you can get to the spelling strategy is all that negativity that they're pouring into their body through a whole load of bad feelings.
How can I refuse to spell something, a strategy?
Well, well, the first thing is you have to negate those bad feelings. It's not I refuse to spell. It's that I've done this badly so often. Hello, pussycat. I've done this badly so often that that I'm going to fail again. So it's overcoming the sense of failure that they're setting up beforehand. So if you make it lighthearted or you create good feelings or, you know, then you open up the possibility that they are able to do this. And just enough to put the strategy in place and get them to the end. And then you crank up the good feelings. You crank the good feelings up so that they start to desire that.
Right, but that is about new strategy, acquisition strategy. It's not about spelling.
Well, it works. It's the same for spelling. You do need to feel good at the end. You need the satisfaction, the reward at the end for having done it. But you don't need to start with bad feelings in the first place.
So let me give an example where it is really bad to start with a bad feeling. And so the classic one is that a guy is just being dumped by his girlfriend or his wife, and he feels really bad, goes to the bar, drinks a lot of alcohol, and then while feeling really bad, chooses his next partner, who just happens to be a lookalike of the ex-wife. So there, it is very important that you start with a good feeling. That before you make important decisions, feel good first, because bad decisions follow bad feelings. But there are strategies where feeling bad is part of the strategy. And the same thing is about if you have to deal with con men. If your unconscious gives you a bad feeling when you're dealing with a person, it could very well be a strategy or part of a strategy that your unconscious mind is warning you against an idiot.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't disagree with any of that, but I can't see the point in saying it doesn't matter how people feel when they start learning the strategy.
No.
I just don't see.
It's important. It's important when they're learning the strategy. I agree with that. But there's a difference between the spelling strategy, because you have there are basically two different spelling strategies. It's the spelling. It's the fast spelling strategy and the slow spelling strategy.
No, there's only one good spelling strategy, which is fast. And your spelling strategy that is not the fastest one. I think the problem is that the one that you're that you're running, the strategy that you're running as fast is your strategy that works really well for you. And it works really
I'm
well
very
for you.
bad at spelling. That's not my.
Well, then maybe it isn't a good, because the whole thing isn't about spelling the words and feeling bad. It is about the kinesthetic down the midline, but we're missing quite a few pieces out of this strategy before you get it. So the most important thing isn't that they write the word down and look at the word and feel and look at the letter and then feel bad or good. The most important thing is that they already have a visual image of the correct word.
Yeah, but it can't be.
If they don't have that, then they have nothing to compare it to. So they have to have the word there to check.
But you can't do it consciously and fast. If you do it for every word, I'm writing, if I'm at my top speed writing, I write 2,000 words an hour. I cannot visualize the spelling for each and every word. I can't even do it for like 1% of the word.
Well, no, because it's speeded up now. It speeds up. It whizzes down. So it isn't a stop start thing. And exactly, you're right in that it is a kinesthetic that often flags that there's a mistake.
Exactly.
It's a kinesthetic that flags a mistake, and then you have to be able to check it against the visual to know that it's not the correct one. But that's after you've learned the word.
Definitely. So
that's when you're writing. Now, what you're confusing here, Joost, is a writing strategy with a spelling strategy.
Okay, and how? Okay, but
or if you like, a better word would be an editing strategy. So you have an editing strategy that you're typing away, and I'm like,
I'm very happy with the word writing strategy. I don't want to call it editing.
Okay, well, writing strategy. So you're writing away, diddly. There's lots of processes going on. You've got your creative process about the words and what it is you're trying to communicate, whatever.
Definitely.
And then you have some default programs running, one of which is your ability to check whether or not the words that you're getting down on the page are correctly spelt. So it's a sort of default program
that's what we call a spelling strategy.
And it's triggered by a kinesthetic.
Yes,
that isn't the same as your spelling strategy. No, it's not a spelling strategy.
Yes.
No, it's not.
Yes, of course.
Listen, we mustn't descend into it isn't, Jos. This isn't very good for our listeners to just disagree on this.
I don't know.
Once you have, there's a difference between learning a strategy and using a strategy.
Yes, but now you're making a distinction between learning words and using words.
Yes.
Okay, I'm perfectly fine saying, okay, if you learn words, then you should start with a good feeling. But that's not a spelling strategy. That's a learning word strategy.
No, it's a learning to spell words strategy. I'll give you a really good example of this. I'm going to give you another example of this because, and actually, if anybody's out there who's got a school that wants to test this out, I'd be happy to do it because we didn't get to the end of this piece of research, which is somewhat frustrating. So I went into a school and I installed with the teachers. Well, I installed and then they carried on. The spelling strategy with
the learning word strategy. You're going there.
Spelling, no, I'm not going there. The spelling strategy.
Your brain
all
went
of
there.
the children from year 5 on. Now, there's a bit of a problem with year 5 with 5-year-olds, not year 5. I beg your pardon. With 5-year-olds, which is year 1, 2 in year 2. The problem with doing this in a whole school in the UK is that they are obsessed with teaching reading through phonics.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the teachers don't understand the difference between reading and spelling and reading and writing and all the different bits of strategies that are involved in that process.
The difference between
so it's
learning
very
words
hard
and using
to
words.
install a visual strategy with these kids who are all going right, to learn. So one of the things I learned was year 2s, I'm not even sure it's worth it at this point because if they're obsessed with phonics, unless we change it at that level. So year 3, 4, 5, that's fine, and 6, that's fine. So we go in, we teach them a spelling strategy, which is, let's just be clear, and don't argue with me about this yet. Right? Begin with a good feeling, make a picture of the word, look at the word, make a picture in your mind of the word, and then write it down in big writing and check that the word that you've written down matches the one in your head and the one that's out there.
Right.
And
It's a learning word strategy, right?
well, it's a spelling strategy. It's a learning to spell words strategy.
Learning to spell word
Yeah,
strategy.
okay, learning to spell words strategy. So we did this, and they all got it. They all got it really well. Our scores went up from, they were doing a spelling test of 8 on a Friday, and the scores went up from something like 35% getting 8 right to 85% getting it right in 2 or 3 weeks. So it was like that. Then we had to look at what else was happening. So there were some things about what do we do about this last 15%? What's going on there? So I was doing that work. But there was another issue that the teachers then reported, which was really interesting. And we haven't done the research on this yet. And I don't know if anybody else has. I'd be very interested to hear if they did. Was that the spelling word, the learning spelling word strategy,
Yes.
spelling strategy, wasn't translating into their writing. So you could ask them to spell a word. Right. Happy, wonderful, brilliant. They could all do that. They all loved that. But when they came to use that word in a story, they often made a lot of silly mistakes, and they weren't translating that. So the bit of that check, which you described, that strategy for checking, wasn't in place.
Right. So let me ask you a question. Which strategy do you think people in life use more? The learning to spell word strategy or the learning to use word strategy?
Well, it depends. If they can't.
It depends. How can it depend? You learn a word once and then you use it over and over and over again.
If you haven't learned the word in the first place, if you haven't learned to spell the word properly in the first place, then your writing or using word strategy will never work, because if you've always learned that
I agree. We're going to learn to spell or to learn words to spell the way you describe, and nothing is wrong with that.
Yeah, it's just a mechanical. It's absolutely, of course, spelling is probably the least interesting of all the strategies. It's just that it's a really good convincer, and everybody needs it in their back pocket. Once you've got it, move on, do the creative thing.
Move on to how to use words.
I'm much more interested in people being able to be creative with language. Actually, I'm not that obsessed with spelling. You have a default program that runs that checks your spelling. I have something called word check, because I'm not. It's not that I can't spell. It's that when I'm being creative, I'm less interested in whether I've spelt the word right than whether I've expressed myself. So I don't use your constant check strategy. I just get it down and I see the red line come up and I think, okay, and then I go back and I check all of it all at once. I have a different strategy to you. I
don't use the strategy. I use your strategy. I just want to write it and get it down to paper as fast as possible. And who gives a fuck about spelling?
Well, it's not for me. Spelling, being able to, if you read Chaucer, and I'm sure you have the equivalent in.
No, we love Chaucer. We don't have the equivalent. The Dutch authors are really, really, really bad.
Well. Chaucer wasn't, but Chaucer is in English, this the pinnacle of the beginnings of
Old English, I think.
Old English. But if you read Chaucer, one of the great things about Chaucer is that the spelling varies all the way through, and I quite like that. You see, I quite like the fact that sometimes you have to stop and think, what is that word? Oh yes, it means it's that. Oh, they've spelt it differently, because I just quite like that. Other people, it drives insane. They can't bear it. It sets off all their kinesthetics. But for me, it doesn't. I'm very relaxed about it.
But those people are probably quite good at using words spelled right. They might not be creative. They might not be fast writers. They might be very boring writers, but there won't be typos.
No, that's right, absolutely, and I it's quite often when I'm writing stuff for some of the charities that I work for, that I do my charity work for. I'll put a proposal together and I'll say, what do people think about this proposal? And there's always one person who comes back, and what they've done is they've red penned it. They basically go, you spelled this wrong, and you should use this, and you spelled that and using an American word and whatever. And I think I'm just asking you to talk to me about the idea. But no, there's always somebody who wants to correct it. But now I've learned now to go, thank you. That's saved me a job.
Yes, absolutely.
and
I do
picky
think that,
people are good editors. We need picky people who
right.
edit things.
But absolutely, I agree. That's absolutely true. And at the same time, I think that if we use an unspecified verb like spelling, that we are more, if we go to specify it, it has more to do with using words to actually write text. And the same as with education. If the children, they learn single words and they have to write and spell it correctly. But at some point, they actually have to write little stories. They have to
Yes,
write out.
and that's the bit we haven't got the strategy down for yet.
You have the strategy down. I just told you. It's just you forgot to implement it.
Well, it's one possible. I shall test your hypothesis out.
Good.
And then by the time I come to teach teaching excellence next time in the Netherlands, we will continue this aspect of the conversation.
Because I think it's stupid for teachers to, you get punished or you get a penalty for if as a student you make a typo or a spelling mistake in one of your answers in a test. I find it ridiculous. When I was studying philosophy, we had to write in English, and if I made an English grammar error, I'm not a native English speaker, or if I made a typo, then they would just say, "Oh, grammar typo," and then you would just lose points for your final mark. I find that's completely weird. I'm not here to learn English. I'm here to learn philosophy.
Yes, exactly. I mean, exactly. I was very fortunate. So I'm a child of the 60s. I was educated in the 60s where self-expression was king. And my English teacher he did red pen them. He did correct anything that he saw. He put, commas in the right place, full stops, capital letters, spelling mistakes and whatever. He corrected them, but then he would never, ever knock any marks off for it. My mother used to go and say, look at this, it's covered in red ink and you've given her an A+. Right. How did this and he would go, but she's so creative and I love her stories and I love her imagination. And I'm just doing that so she gets. And his idea was that as long as you read through, and he used to say, read through what I've done and see where your mistakes are. And he just reckoned that if you keep reading through them, you would correct them, providing you felt good about your writing.
Yes. Well,
and so he made me feel good about what I'd written, starting with a good feeling, finishing with a good feeling. So I didn't mind putting all that other stuff right. Okay, I'll do that then. Because for me, spelling, grammar, all of these things that we're obsessed with, they're simply mechanical skills. They're not high functioning skills. On Bloom's taxonomy, they are mastery skills. They're low level skills.
Right.
And we just need to get them into people's back pockets quickly and easily, as speedily as we can, so that they can go on and be creative human beings, and they can, they can learn new stuff. They can be great mathematicians or astronauts or whatever it is they want to be. But they're just a set of mastery skills that the strategy enables people, knowing what the strategy is, enables them to quickly and easily get that down. And once it's down, move on, and it becomes an unconscious process. And we don't want to be obsessing with how we do something when we just wanted to assign it to our unconscious once we know how to do it. But of course it gets in people's way. I meet adults who are incapacitated by the fact that somebody just didn't give them a basic mastery skill at the right time, because sadly, even now, and probably even more so, I'm afraid to say, teachers are not taught this stuff. This is not on the curriculum.
No.
And so they're not, they're struggling they're still doing this thing about laying out in front of a group of 30 kids, scattergunning an approach, hoping that something lands correctly, instead of knowing precisely and elegantly how to put the right strategy in place at the right time so you get those mastery skills down.
And all of this, while Teaching Excellence has been published, they can simply buy the book.
They can simply buy the book and it's all in there, yes, but then they'd have to read it, Joost.
Oh dear. And
by the way, whilst you've raised Teaching Excellence, I just want to say here, it's a good opportunity. Very soon, the new, not a new edition, but the second edition, Teaching Excellence will be available again on a different platform on Amazon and Barnes Noble et al. And as an ebook, because people have been asking me about how they get the ebook, and it'll be up and running by the end of September. What are you laughing at?
I'm laughing at because I know who's going to put it up, and then having a.
No, you don't.
No.
No, you don't.
Do we have a new one?
Guess I'm putting it up.
Okay. Oh, then I won't laugh.
I was going to say no. I'm putting it up.
All right. Well, thank you very much. It was very
There's obviously a conversation. You know things that I don't know, so there's a conversation I need to have with you, probably before 1:30 today.
Okay. Well, then we should. Okay. Do you want me to connect you through Zoom to continue
Yes.
this conversation?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll have a quick talk to you.
Okay, good. We'll end this. Are there so the topic for next week is propulsion systems.
Oh, we're going back to propulsion systems. Okay, yeah.
That's at your request. But
yes, we'll do that.
But I think are there other topics that you are so boxy about?
You just like me to get on my soapbox, don't you?
Yes, I do.
All right, I'll think of another. Well, I don't know. This is my main one, I have to say.
Yes, no, I know.
I can repeat this in a number of different forms. You know, this is the one this is what gets the fire in my belly. This one.
Yeah. So if you happen to think of another, then let me know. And
until you then, ask my students what I scare them about. Sometimes they say I scare them. So I mean, if I find out what I scare them about, those are probably the subjects we should cover.
Okay, I'll check. And but for next week, 1 p.m. Central European Standard Time on Tuesday, it will be Tuesday the 30th, and we'll talk about propulsion systems or how to use the ABC model to motivate yourself. Thank you for watching. If you're listening or watching this later on, thank you. And hopefully we see you live at Tuesdays, every Tuesday on 1 p.m. Bye, Jane. Good to have you around again. And
bye.
See you next week. Bye.